Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Chug Life Podcast. I am your host, Michael Vega, and today we are discussing some of the most horrific events that are currently ongoing in and around the war in Iran, and some of the latest developments with this. As well, economically, we're going to be discussing that and so many other things. So, that being said, give us a follow, give us a like, comment what you think, and this is another episode that is, of course, going to be for folks that are above the age of 18. And we're going to be discussing events that are related to war, and we are not glorifying war. We are simply communicating the effects as they are so everybody can be more informed on the issues. So, the latest development is the fact that this war is already costing upwards of $6 trillion for the U.S. economy. So currently there is a net negative of jobs as a whole to the job market. There have not been any job additions. So on top of that, you have a huge loss in the Dow Jones as well as the S&P 500 and a huge increase in the oil sector. So what this means is the U.S. economy is primed for a depression very, very similar to what was seen in 2008 and throughout those years. Now, with all of that depressing information out of the way, some of the good news here is if you are able to get into oil stocks and you are able to position yourself, you may be able to come out of this better than you went into it. And I'm not going to give people financial advice, but that is one of the very, very few silver linings to all of this. And we have to just kind of remember that this was all started to distract from the Epstein files. They tried to say that Iran was going to launch an attack. They tried to say that it was an imminent deal, and it turns out that every single person who has spoken about this from the Iranian side has said that they were not going to attack and that there was actually nothing that they were doing aside from just negotiating. Now, we have to remember that these folks have been preparing for war for decades. I mean, they have negotiated and came to the table. We have always come to deals with them, and it's just kind of always been pretty solid relationship aside from rhetoric and aside from the fact that they had a huge swath of proxies that they used to launch terror attacks across the Middle East. They did always come to terms with us as the U.S. government. Now, there has been a portion of the Israelis that have tried to say that this is something that needed to be repaid for because of October 7th, and that they somehow knew about October 7th hasn't been proven. And in fact, there has been a lot of evidence to say that Hamas specifically didn't rope in Iran because Iran would have leaked and Mossad would have found out, because it's been believed that Mossad had ties within the upper echelon of the Iranian government. So not only is that a moot point, but you also have the massive fallacy here that it's somewhat going to equate to being able to silence other massive events, because it just seems to kind of fall upon deaf ears whenever folks are shouting about these issues, whenever the Epstein survivors came out, they were silenced across the board. And in some cases, sure, you had folks that ended up coming out and getting a few minutes on the news, but in terms of pressure, in terms of good journalism to be able to push political officials to make those decisions, those tough decisions, it never happened. And it just kind of really proves the point that the control here from all of these pedophiles is top notch. And the fingers of this operation are very powerful. And it's scary stuff. So, to get into some of the events, some of the recent events that have found a home within the right, you would probably be looking at some of the decisions that have been made by the Supreme Court to push that into a more populist position, but it's not going to change anybody's perspective on the Israeli cause. And I might just be blabbering at this point, but I think that there has been a huge shift in how people view the Israeli government and how people view the Israeli state. And there's going to be a huge reckoning for the people that come after the current leadership. And it's literally the same thing that we're going to have to deal with in the U.S. And that is, the people that have to clean up this problem are going to be busy for decades, possibly. I mean, the amount of damage that has been seen in Gaza and the amount of damage that has been seen in Lebanon, the horrors that are being brought forth by both countries, as well as the United States, on Iran and even Iraq. We are just lighting up every possible area in the Middle East right now. It's horrifying. And it costs just insane amounts of money. I mean, when you try to imagine, it's truly impossible to even quantify it. But we're going to do a small exercise to kind of understand it and maybe help you understand what it looks like. So for those who have been unaware, the U.S. Treasury had declared the U.S. insolvent about 4 or 5 days ago, at the start of last week, and it didn't make a peep in any of the news. Nothing, absolutely nothing happened. And what ended up happening instead was that the attacks just grew larger. And I mean, there were so many reports of just missile fights back and forth between Iran and Israel that it just absolutely overtook every news channel. I mean, it's insane. War rules the news. It's everywhere. It's incredible to imagine how much is going under the radar just because all of those news big heads can't just keep focused on something. You know, they can't see this through. They're all so scared of the ramifications of the Epstein files that they do not even want to see this through now. They've opened the can of worms and they just backed off. Completely backed off. Now, the reason that we are still discussing the ties here within the Epstein and the Iranian war being started, there's a lot, but the most basic one is the Israeli connection, because both actors within this war are in the Epstein files. See, both actors within this war aren't just in the Epstein files, but there have been resignations on both sides of that connection to further the cause that top leaders on both sides were actively involved and helping Epstein. And so you got to consider with how they try and gaslight everybody, saying that no, we just had a professional connection. Well, it turns out that there's actually a way for them to get away with that deeper connection by just stating that it was smaller than that. Because when the news reels end up turning over, the next day happens, and the next big thing happens, that is just going to immediately go right away out into the garbage. It's going to be forgotten in 5 minutes until something else happens that causes it to resurface. And then, once again, we do the cycle. And we're all asking ourselves, when will people see the inside of prison cells? When will people start to be taken to the electric chair over their crimes? And specifically, when will Donald Trump face his time in front of a trial and in front of a jury? Well, we may know hopefully soon enough, because there are also other reports that Donald's health is getting worse, and it is rapidly deteriorating. And when I say rapidly, it is rapid. We can see him in just about every single public showing, really, or anytime that he sits down in a chair, he just gets comfy and dozes off, dude. He's out. And his face is drooping, his hand still looks like shit, so he's still getting whatever they were giving him about a year to 2 years ago, as far as we can go back. I would say a year is probably closer, but the point is, the streets are talking. It has been said, and it is out in the world, that Donald is sick, mentally and physically. He is sick in his soul. And, well, he may have his time soon enough. So all of these issues are going to end up being passed on to J.D. Vance. And consequently, Vance is going to have to power through with a deadlocked Congress and potentially a Democratic supermajority, to couple with that the fact that it has been said that he has championed for this war, and on top of the fact that he is deeply hated amongst every facet of the Republican Party. And I don't know whether the Republican Party is going to be able to put forth a candidate that is going to be able to challenge the outside Trump perspective. You know, I only think it's going to be surrogates from now, possibly. You know, guys that have had close relation to him and that will use that to try and get into the limelight. And that will be kind of a litmus test, whether you knew, it's like if you knew Stalin or not, you know, if you survived the purge or not, is going to be the test now. That's going to be the litmus test for the new MAGA party. And unfortunately, that's where we're at, is a party that is seeking to challenge birthright citizenship, a party that is seeking to outright just dismantle the Constitution with the most horrendous claims that Congress isn't the one that is going to be doing war powers, that is a presidential power, and the fact that they are just adding taxes and taking away taxes on the people just however they want, and then adding the fact that he is prosecuting wars upon wars upon wars like he is a dictator. What does that say, ladies and gentlemen? What does that tell you about the person who is making these decisions? When one day, we can have, oh, the war is done, we have won, and then the next day, Iran is bombing Israel. Can you imagine that? What confusion, what state of confusion he must be in to be in such just utter, I mean, he's just out of the loop. Like, it's insane. I don't know how much he's actually like being told, because we only know that he gets shown videos of stuff. So he gets shown stuff of bombs hitting and of stuff exploding, and he sees a couple of minutes of that, and that's it. So I don't know if he's actually like being shown casualty counts, if he's being shown bombing targets and what is currently being done, whether it's industrial capacity, military, whether we're looking after, radar, so on and so forth, And so I don't think that he has the ability and the information to be able to make strategic decisions, as well as have a political and strategic outcome in mind. So you just kind of go into a room and you're just lighting the whole room up just because you don't know what the fuck's going on. And when somebody screams, you go, oh shit. And it turns out you've blown up all your alliances. It turns out that you've blown up your own economy. All for the benefit of, I guess, Israel? No, Israel's not even benefiting from this. They're getting bombed. So what's coming out of all of this shit? Where do we stand to benefit aside from wasting money, wasting JASMs, wasting bombs, wasting lives? Already the casualty count is being reported to be in the hundreds. That is the American estimate. And the Iranian estimate is well into the thousands, dozens of thousands. And the question is whether the proper authorities had the wherewithal to make all of the evacuations done at the necessary times, or whether they were struck. And all of the videos that we've seen of hotels being hit and random houses being hit and random high rises being hit turns out to have been literally the rooms where all of the operators and Marines and people that were meant to be based and barrack there were staying. And so you have casualty counts that are similar to Vietnam rather than casualty counts that are similar to when we went in to go and get bin Laden. Because I can't really fathom a single operation that could be more disastrous than having that evacuation fail and the first ICBM strikes of the entire war having taken out dozens of thousands of those soldiers. And we're not even discussing the failure of the carrier strike groups to do their job because of the terrible condition that the boats are in. And I don't know whether this is something that is a Hegseth issue or whether this is just kind of a military-industrial complex issue, which are both really terrifying prospects to consider. But, well, I have spewed a lot of shit today. I have brought up a lot of points today, and the main point I would like for everybody to stick on for a second here is what a ground invasion would look like. So we know that Israel is incapable of making that ground invasion because they are currently stuck in Lebanon. and they are currently stuck in issues that are right on their border. So, likewise, we have no capabilities for the Saudi Arabians to get into this because apparently they're just too pussy to not get into it, which is insane. And the other Gulf states are in the same position. Iraq doesn't want to get involved because we are currently bombing their land and bombing other stuff inside Iraq as we please. Now, all of those issues bring up a particular problem. You have two superpowers that are helping Iran survive. China and Russia are providing Iran with information, satellite, and all of these other target type data. What happens when Iran gets enough of a break to be able to establish a defensive network strong enough to receive Chinese help, proper Chinese help? That is World War III. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for checking us out. Thank you all for listening. God bless you all.